Most people chase passive income for the money. But what if I told you that was actually the wrong reason? The real reason? It's about what money can't buy you: your time, your health, and your relationships. Because if your entire life depends on you clocking in, then one accident, one diagnosis, one bad day, and literally everything that you've built could collapse overnight. This isn't just about building wealth that we're always talking about. It's actually about protecting your family and your future from the chaos you may never see coming. Now, if that hits home for you, keep watching. And if you're new here, Dr. Jeff Anzalone, a dentist on a mission to get you to the point that work is optional. Check out my free passive income training, links below this video. So let's start off with this first, discussing what we call the trap. All right. Most of us were trained to believe that our value comes from how much we do. Now, I was raised in the 80s and 90s. Back then, we used to watch shows like ER, Chicago Hope, things like that. And for those shows about doctors, we're always looking at what they're doing. What are those people doing? They're working all the time. They're seeing more patients, more procedures, working more hours, making more money. So that's what, at least my error, I was trained to believe that's where my value would come from, about how much I could do, looking at those different TV shows. But at some point, we start to realize, once I started practicing and doing that, that I looked around, I was like, you know what? This really isn't freedom. I was in a grind. I think after 8 to 10 years of practicing, I was around 40 years old. I realized I was just in a grind that if I kept doing this, it was never going to end. Okay. If that sounds like you at this point, or maybe you've thought about this before, once you get to that point, what do you have? Well, you have the income, right? You have a good house, decent house, nice cars, I'm sure, but you really have no margin. You really have no time to think. You have no time for yourself. Many of you may not have any time for your family. Sometimes it feels like you're living in the Bill Murray movie, Groundhog Day. You get up, you do the same thing over and over again. And unfortunately, that is the trap that most high earners, doctors, dentists, attorneys, people like that, they fall into. Now, I've never talked about this publicly, but I actually saw this play out in a very tragic way. It was actually during my residency at LSU. One of our faculty members, somebody that many of us respected and looked up to, unfortunately, he took his own life and didn't see it coming. But now that I've had years and years to process it, and knowing what I know now, I couldn't put myself in his shoes. He was married with kids, with this great practice. And it was always like thinking in my back of my mind, why would somebody do something like that? But again, now that I've gone through all this, looking back, it started to make sense. He was under enormous stress. Okay. Over time, slowly but surely, and this is coming from other dental colleagues, he'd start to become just a perfectionist. But it had to be perfect. It just grows on you. Everything had to be just right. And maybe all that pressure, it just built up, and then he did kind of that unthinkable. But what really opened my eyes was actually what happened afterward. Okay. As soon as that happened, so many people, friends, colleagues, family members, they came together and they try to do everything to keep his practice up and running. They're trying to get some of the other people to come in there, keep seeing patients, keep it running, so they could eventually sell it. Because that was it. From what I understand, that was really the sole income. His practice was the sole income for his family. Now, you have to imagine the lifestyle that they had built. Had a great lifestyle, like I mentioned: cars, house, trips, that sort of thing, maybe private school, I don't know. And then suddenly, literally overnight, it was gone. Now, if he had some now I don't know this for a fact, but I'm not sure. But if he had other streams of income, non-clinical streams coming in, then he could have had like a safety net. And maybe if he'd had that over time and had all these streams of income coming in, wasn't so relying on his active dental income, Possibly the outcome could have been different. I don't know. Or maybe even if he still made that choice and things would have played out the way that they did, maybe his family wouldn't have been left with that huge crushing financial burden on top of all the emotional ones too. And really that moment stuck with me. And honestly, thinking about it back then, now that I know what I know now, and that was over 20 years ago, and now that I'm talking about it and thinking about it and reflecting on it, it seemed to have planted a seed. It must have planted a seed somewhere that eventually made me start to ask, well, what happens if I stop working? What happens if you stop working? What would you do? How would you provide for your family? For me, it happened when I was around 40 years old and was actually a hand or wrist injury when I was snow skiing. That was really my wake up call. And that's really when it hit me that my entire financial world is literally, especially if you're a surgeon or you're a dentist, a profession like that, our entire financial world is what? Built on our ability to use our hands to trade time for money to treat patients. If I couldn't work, if you're in this situation, if you can't work, more than likely the income is going to stop. The music's going to stop. And at that point, everything that I'd worked for could literally just start to fall apart. And, that was my wake up call when I had the injury. And that's when I knew that I really had to find another way. Enter something that, again, I had no idea about. But once I got injured, I really started to find out more about because so many of the wealthy people have this passive income. Let's talk about what passive income really means, though. Okay. Most people think passive income is about, and watch the YouTube videos and Instagram reels, everybody talking about passive income, and it's all about getting rich while we're doing nothing and getting the Lambos and boats and vacations and all that. That's what social media wants you to think that passive income is about. Maybe when you're 18 or 20 years old, yeah, maybe. But when you're like me, you're an old guy, you're married, you're kids, you got an established lifestyle. That's not it. Okay. It's not about buying all the stuff. It's about this. For me, passive income is simply this: freedom. It's about being able to choose if and when you go to work. It's about taking that Friday off to go to your kid's field trip and not sweating that you're going to have this big hit in your paycheck. It's not going to just screw up your life. Oh, I've got to take a day off to go watch them play a ball tournament or a field trip or some sort of event. It's about creating space to take care of one of the most important things, if not the most important thing that you have, is your health. Creating space to take care of your marriage, if you're married, your mental clarity, that sort of thing. A lot of times we're so get up, rush to work, you run through all that and you come home and you just do the same thing over and over again, and you don't create that space to do that. It's about knowing that if something ever happens to you, your family's going to be taken care of. They're going to be okay. That, to me, that's the real return on the investment. Passive income buys back your most valuable asset. And you don't think about this when you're younger, you're getting out of your training, but it's that, right? It's your time. I used to think that once I started doing these videos and the articles on debtfreedoctor.com, I really think I started out, I used to think that I was just teaching people how to invest in real estate for passive income, because that was the route I was doing. But that's not it. I'm really, now that I really dive into it, I've been doing it for years and years, I'm really helping people, and I hope I'm helping you think differently. One of the most popular books, and I've referenced this before, I have it on my shelf over here. I think it was written in the early 30s by Napoleon Hill. It's called this. And today it's still selling millions of copies a year, and it was written in the 30s. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. If you haven't read it, I make it a point to reread it every year. It's not how to grow rich or what to invest in to grow rich. It's this: think and grow rich. He took Now, back then they were millionaires, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, people like that. He sat down with them, but now they would be billionaires in today's time, sitting down with Buffett or Bezos or Trump or somebody like that, that are billionaires, and really figuring out what have they done for success? How have they thought? What makes them click? And that's what he did. And he wrote down and he started finding these same traits, even though they were in totally different industries. These people had these same traits. And the thing is, they thought differently than most people. You have to think differently. I was not thinking differently. I was on the Dave Ramsey path. I was on literally the path that every financial advisor teaches us. I was on the path that up until that point, that's all I knew. You go to school, you make good grades, you get into a profession that, quote, has a potential for high income, and then you work until you're 65 or 70, and every year you put money in a 401k, live below your means, and become debt free if you can. That's all I ever knew. And really, there's nothing wrong with that. But what happens if something makes a break in that? What happens if you can't work for an extended period of time? What happens if you can't work permanently? What happens if you don't want to work in that profession anymore? And that's the thing that we don't ever think about. When I was coming up in the 80s and 90s, that's typically what you would get into a career and that's it. You would stay in that career. But now things are so much different. Now when people ask me what I do, I used to tell them that I was a dentist, a periodontist. But now I tell them I own a bunch of real estate. It's different. But back in when I started, that was like unheard of. Now it's just becoming more prevalent. So my main goal is now to, number one, help you to start thinking differently. Okay. Helping physicians, helping dentists break free from burnout and really just rediscover what life could be. Okay. And do you know what happens when you do that, when you break free? Not only do you show your kids that you're on a different path, but it's almost like you go back to when you were a kid. Think about it. And you get up in the summer, you're free. You don't have to worry about your mortgage. You don't have to worry about money, eating, whatever. It's like you do whatever you want. And it's almost like we're reverting back to our childhood. And once your kids start seeing you do this, it shows your kids, hey, there's a different path to life. You model what real wealth looks like, one built on margin and purpose. And you start to really you can literally rewrite your family story. This isn't just about what I normally talk about, syndications and spreadsheets and that sort of thing. Literally, this is a movement that I want to get started, that hopefully I'll get you to get started in your area, in your circle. So if you're only focused on just what we typically are focused on, you go to work and you go through life and you're just focused on, I'm just going to be upfront with you, you're thinking too small. God puts you here for a much bigger purpose than to just go through life doing one little thing and just to retire to do nothing. We're made for so much more than that. Okay. So again, if you're only focused on retirement, you're really thinking too small. You don't have to wait until you're old to be, quote, free. You can build a life where, I'm telling you, because I've done it, I'm 50 years old. You can build a life where your work, your profession becomes optional long before you hit 65. And when you do, you won't just have, quote, more money. You're going to have more moments. You're going to have more presence and, more importantly, more legacy. So if that sounds like the life that you want, do me a favor, subscribe, hit that like button, and check out some of the other videos that I have on now that we have what we need to do, okay, how to get going. But I've got plenty more videos on how to really start diving in and doing that, building real passive income one step at a time so that you can truly buy back your time and get freedom. I'll see you in the next video.